For the purposes of our course, the way that I think about it, I guess the way I want you to think about it, is generally just the conditions in which a species can survive and reproduce. And those conditions, or the niche, could be determined by water economy, which I'll talk about. That is, the ability of a species to regulate its body water. Its tolerance for temperatures. We saw the Arctic fox out there, frigid cold, and its tolerance for colder temperatures. Its body size, certainly its diet and its circadian and circannual rhythms, its daily behaviour activity, its seasonal activity, rhythm of timing, daily circadian and seasonal. Its habitat use, so how it uses the habitat available to it, and of course its behaviour. These are all factors that affect a species, how an animal can survive and reproduce.
The Mayans didn't enjoy their chocolate in the bar form we do now today. It would be over 1,500 years before that happened. Instead, they drank their chocolate. After grinding the cacao seeds into a paste, they would then mix it with water, chili peppers, cornmeal, and other ingredients into a thick, foamy, bitter concoction. Chocolate had a very special place in the Mayan society and was often used for ceremonial purposes. Mayan couples often drank chocolate at marriage ceremonies, and it was offered to the gods. Although chocolate was enjoyed by most social classes in the Mayan society, the Aztecs weren't so lucky. Since most of the Aztec Empire consisted of high, dry land, it was nearly impossible for the cacao tree to flourish. Because of this, the only way for Aztecs to come by chocolate would be to trade for it. The only members of Aztec society that could afford to consume the cacao beans were the merchants and the Aztec nobility. However, Aztec society was so obsessed with the product that they actually used it as money. People would actually carry around a pocket full of cacao seeds, much like we do pocket change. In fact, people went so far as to actually counterfeit cacao beans to use as money.
politicians talk all the time about democracy. Today we're going to learn about the moment of its invention. What sort of time are we talking about?
Well, we can, in fact, name a specific year, 508 BC. It marked the end of the period of what was called tyranny, or effectively dictatorship by strong families, and the assertion of its will by the people.
How did it happen?
I think people have got pretty fed up with the dictators who've been rather too self-indulgent and not done a terribly good job in the later years. But in a way, these dictatorships were an advance from earlier kingship in many states. So that was one step. But the next step was to spread the base of power and introduce power by the people.
And that's where we come to the word demos, democracy.
Yes, indeed. The demos, the people, it means the community as a whole. We have to be slightly careful, of course, how we define the community in political terms, because it's hard to know how many people there were in Athens at that period. It was a fairly small-scale society, but it's normally reckoned that there was something of the order of 30,000 citizens.
The past 2 years have brought more than their fair share of hurricanes, and this season's shaping up to be another big one. This comes after 2 decades of low hurricane activity. How do scientists know what the hurricane season will be like? Why should hurricane prediction be any more accurate than, let's say, your 5-day forecast? Well, we'll try to find out this hour. We'll also talk about El Niño. You know El Niño? It may be coming back because strong El Niño conditions are developing in the tropical Pacific. Will that mean heavy rainfall and mudslides out west, and hot, perhaps, droughts in parts of Africa and South America?
For many developed countries, the 1980s was a time when the switch from traditional heavy industries and manufacturing to services and information-based enterprise was completed. This led to widespread changes in employment patterns in these countries, as well as having profound social effects. In fact, it isn't going too far to say that there was a basic transformation in the whole culture, which can still be observed today.
Labor believes that there can be benefits from change, but if we're going to have change, it needs to be on the basis that the government has addressed the cost-benefit issues and has addressed the legitimate privacy concerns of Australians. So far, it's failed to address either. In relation to cost-benefit, it claims there will be a saving of the order of $3 billion over 10 years, but it refuses to release the assumptions on which that claim is based. So it simply expects Australians to take it on trust.
What is classical physics? Let's start with the easiest, perhaps. What is physics? Physics is the study of the natural world. It's the study of the physical world, the world we live in. It's experimental science, and it's really the heart, the core of all other experimental sciences. Physics goes beyond just a simple description of nature. It's an attempt to unify a broad variety of phenomena that we observe in the world, both the natural world and the technological world. We're looking for the underlying principles, the explanation, the prediction. We would like to be able to really understand the world around us, measurable things in particular. Physics studies matter and energy, space and time, studies particles and waves, forces and motion. These are a lot of words that we use. We have deep intuitive sense about what those words mean. And part of what we're going to be doing in this course is to start looking carefully at each of these words. What do I mean by energy? What do I mean by force? How would I define that in a laboratory and measure it? And what use is it? How does it help me to understand things about the world?
Hey, Sally. How are you? You all right?
Right, yeah.
Look, I was wondering, did you go to Alan Johnson's lecture on globalisation yesterday?
Of course. And why weren't you there?
I had a bit of a nightmare. My alarm didn't go off and I overslept.
Oh, John, that's pathetic.
I know. Was it any good, the lecture?
Well, yeah. No, actually it was quite interesting, but it was a bit complicated. I took some notes, actually.
Fantastic.
Oh, I'm sorry to bother you. I wonder, could you direct me to Lecture Hall 2B, please?
Yes, of course, but what lecture do you have?
It's Sociology, Professor Travers.
Travers. Yeah, we had him last year. He's fantastic.
Oh, really?
He has a tendency to sort of wander around the campus talking to himself, but he's really, really inspirational. You know, he helped Giddens when he was asked to advise the government.
Oh.
Wish we had him this year.
Well, I don't know him. I've not been to any of his lectures so far. You see, I'm just taking sociology as an elective or a subsidiary subject.
Oh, so what are you studying for your major?
Psychology.
I could never fathom psychology.
Oh.
I can hardly say it. It always seemed like literature confusing itself a bit, but I don't know. Anyway, this is all very interesting, but you need to get to...
2B.
2B. All the sociology lectures are in Block B, which is next to the Union Building. So, if you go along here and turn right at the end of the path, you'll see the Union Building in front of you.
Right.
Block B is on the right as you face the Union.
Well, thank you so much.
Okay.
Maybe see you at one of the lectures. Bye-bye.
Good luck.
The first step was just to see if we had any competitors. There was one company in New Zealand who had a similar idea, but they lacked the branding, I think, which is very important if you're going to be marketing a product properly. The next step was to research the injuries and ailments that surfers suffer whilst they're travelling. That was a pretty easy part considering I'm a surfer myself, but it was also a good idea to get some research and find out how much people were spending on first aid products, what was a popular product to take with you while overseas, and how much would you be willing to pay for a kit like this.
Scott actually spent a year researching and developing the kit and successfully applied for funding under the government New Enterprise Incentive Scheme, which supported him for that year. Now, the product's on the market offered through the Natural Footed website, which Scott carefully designed along the same lines as the first aid kit.
The kit had to look professional. It's a medical product, but at the same time it had to have some style to it, and that's what we've tried to go with.
It's quite interesting to think about the glitazones, where we assumed because they reduce blood sugar that they would have beneficial effects on these long-term cardiovascular issues. But now we're finding that with rosiglitazone, they may actually be deleterious, and with pioglitazone, it may be a small benefit. And so the question you ask about the benefit-to-risk ratio is really the critical one today. Should we continue to use these drugs? And I think it's quite difficult with the small amount of information we have to come to a
Is there a moment of panic? I guess that sort of ebbs and flows, because if we get it wrong at any stage, it's pretty out there if you get it wrong. Dealing with a virus.
Their main suspect was a virus. Retroviruses are known to cause cancer.
As far as possible cancer.
Yet no matter how hard they looked, no one could see any sign of viral attack. And there were baffling anomalies. Like, why aren't any devils showing immunity?
We had 10 or 11 pathologists around a microscope with 10 or 11 different opinions about what we were actually dealing with. Yeah, I mean, we were...
A professor is also a member of a profession, presumably one comparing people who see their discipline as a vocation in its full sense. A vocation, from vocare, to call, is a call. Despite some modern uses which reduce it to the practicalities of employment, practice, and not theory, the product of training, not education, a vocation is less than this. A calling is active as well as passive. It implies a sensation of purpose. There is a duty to be vocal.
You know, the incredible thing about quantum mechanics, there are many incredible things, but one of them, at least to me, is that it really works. It is the theory of the universe. It describes what's going on here on Earth, and it describes what happens in the early universe that Andre studies. And so when we think about how those building blocks that Leon was just describing fit together to make the world around us, we use quantum mechanics to describe atoms, nuclei, molecules, light. It is the theory of the world. And so it's not surprising that we see it in many everyday occurrences and many everyday applications. An example might be the lasers that you see in a compact disc player or the supermarket scanner.
Your role will principally involve development of new chemical processes.
To gain full marks, an appropriate bibliography is required.
The integration of architecture studies with community projects is widely encouraged.